They thought Mark Reynolds was just another homeowner to boss around. 28 condos shoved onto his land without a single warning, with the HOA grinning like they'd won, his neighbors whispered behind curtains. Some cheering, some quietly fearing the chaos to come. But they didn't know the secret he'd been hiding. Mark owned a demolition company. Every fine, every ridiculous rule, and every smirk from the board only fueled a plan they couldn't even imagine. So what happens when the person they tried to bully holds the power to reduce their empire to rubble? Stick around, because this is where things get explosive. The HOA seemed confident and smug, daring anyone to complain. Mr. Whitman, the president, and the board members appeared in their polished office, unaware that Mark was prepared to challenge every rule, every fine, and every overreach. The tension was thick, and a storm was quietly building, one they would never see coming. For years, Mark Reynolds thought he had the perfect life. His house sat at the edge of a quiet, sun-dappled neighborhood where kids rode bikes along the sidewalks, and everyone waved when they passed. Weekends were spent in his backyard garden, immersed in the smell of fresh soil and blooming flowers. Evenings were for tinkering in his workshop, the one place where Mark truly felt at home. Neighbors knew him as the helpful, friendly homeowner who could fix almost anything, or, as he joked, the man who just happened to run a demolition company tucked into his garage. At first, the HOA seemed harmless. Friendly newsletters, occasional meetings, and minor suggestions about fence heights or landscaping. Life was calm and routine. That is, until Mark noticed the first trucks pulling into the lot next to his property. He assumed it was a single new home or some routine construction. But when plans posted on the HOA website revealed 28 condos being built on his land, Mark realized something was seriously wrong. Neighbors whispered, some dismissing it as progress, others quietly, worried about what it meant for the community. The HOA, smug, confident, and daring anyone to complain. Every letter was a calculated attempt to intimidate, filled with permits, regulations, and legal jargon. They didn't expect Mark to fight back. They didn't know his expertise, his determination, or the capabilities of his demolition business. As the condo's walls slowly began to rise, Mark felt anticipation rather than anger. He knew the story was only beginning, and he held the cards in ways the HOA could never imagine. Soon, the neighborhood's polite facade would crack, and the real conflict would begin. The first days of construction tested Mark's patience. Cranes lifted walls, trucks roared onto his land, and sunlight disappeared from his backyard. He contacted the HOA expecting a mistake, but instead received a thick packet claiming all construction was within regulations. The message was clear. They didn't intend to stop. Mark meticulously documented everything. Trucks parked on his property, emails, letters, photos, and measurements. Every night he studied bylaws and county property records, searching for loopholes. Each time he found one, the HOA escalated. Notices of unauthorized plantings, fines for non-compliant fence height, and warnings about disturbing community harmony. Each absurd rule was weaponized to make Mark feel trapped. Neighbors began quietly participating in the harassment. Complaints about normal noise from his workshop or the garden shed emerged. Inspectors arrived almost daily, photographing and citing Mark for every minor infraction. The HOA was testing him, measuring how far he could be pushed. Mark tried negotiation, proposing compromises that wouldn't affect his property or the condos, but the board rejected every offer. Meetings felt like performances, with HOA members seated smugly, nodding in private amusement. They thought he'd break, but the tension only sharpened Mark's resolve. Then the petty harassment intensified. A single overhanging branch was declared hazardous, accompanied by a threatening fine. It was absurd but strategic. The HOA wanted fear, compliance, and submission. Mark felt not fear but determination. He began cataloging weaknesses in the construction, rushed foundations, unstable scaffolding, minor mistakes. Each day he imagined reclaiming what was rightfully his, not impulsively, but deliberately. The adrenaline fueled him, sharpening his planning. Finally, the HOA scheduled a public hearing to cement the condo's legality and humiliate him in front of the community. Mark knew this was the turning point. The stage was set for confrontation, and he was ready to assert control. The day of the HOA hearing arrived. Mark entered the room with calm determination. The board, smug and confident, didn't realize they were about to face their worst nightmare. Mark presented evidence: trucks on his property, photos of the encroaching condos, letters proving harassment, and records of fines for absurd violations. The room fell silent. Neighbors leaned forward, shocked at the extent of the HOA's overreach. Then Mark dropped the bombshell. He presented a property survey showing the condos were partially on his land. Gasps echoed through the room. The HOA president sputtered, unable to regain control. Mark had legal confirmation. Every foot of concrete encroaching on his property was trespass. Next, he revealed his blueprint showing how he could safely reclaim the land if necessary. "I don't need to destroy these buildings," he said. "I just need to enforce what's mine." Cameras clicked, neighbors whispered, and the board's smug confidence began to crumble. They had underestimated him. The board scrambled to argue technicalities, but Mark countered each point with precision. Every absurd rule, every abuse of authority was exposed. Neighbors realized the HOA's actions were not just petty, they were systematic. Finally, Mark demonstrated symbolically outside, rolling in a small piece of demolition equipment. Cameras captured the moment, neighbors gasped, and the board paled. He didn't act destructively, but the message was clear. He was not to be bullied. As the meeting ended, Mark walked out, leaving the board muttering. The condos remained, but the power dynamic had shifted irreversibly. He had taken control without violence, lawlessly, or losing the moral high ground. Yet, as he looked at the buildings towering over his garden, he knew the real question lingered. When the next challenge came, who would truly hold the upper hand? After the hearing, life in the neighborhood subtly but profoundly shifted. The HOA, once untouchable, began walking cautiously. Every notice they sent was triple-checked. Fines became rare, rules were enforced reasonably, and the smirks were gone. Mark didn't gloat, he didn't need to. The power of preparation and truth had spoken louder than revenge. Mark's backyard became a symbol of resilience. Neighbors approached him, asking how he had documented, planned, and navigated the bureaucracy. It became a lesson. Rules protect communities, not oppress them. Residents learned to watch, question, and document their surroundings. The condos remained, but no longer as a looming threat. They became a reminder of the absurdity that had caused months of stress. The HOA tried one last minor attempt to assert authority, but Mark's firm, polite responses silenced any further overreach. Residents observed quietly, understanding that some battles required vigilance, not fear. Personally, Mark reflected on his approach. He could have demolished the condos recklessly, satisfying temporary anger. Instead, he acted strategically, letting legal knowledge and preparation do the work. Real power, he realized, is not in brute force, but in thoughtful, deliberate action. The community changed. Residents attended meetings with more awareness. They documented infractions, asked questions, and learned that authority can be respected, but tyranny cannot. Mark's satisfaction wasn't revenge, it was justice. He reclaimed respect, set boundaries, and proved that patience, intelligence, and courage could overcome bureaucratic overreach. His garden flourished again, sunlight creeping around the condos. Children rode bikes past the shadowed buildings. Neighbors exchanged friendly waves, and the neighborhood slowly regained equilibrium. Yet Mark remained vigilant. Power, once challenged, shifts but doesn't disappear. He knew future overreach could occur, but he was ready. The final takeaway echoed clearly. Authority is not absolute. Rules are not weapons. And when systems are abused, standing firm, smartly, ethically, decisively is the only way to protect what's right. As Mark stood in his backyard, sunlight dancing across his garden, he reflected. The story wasn't just about land or property. It was about respect, courage, and boundaries. The HOA had underestimated him. The community had witnessed the battle, and he had emerged victorious, wiser, and ready. And still one question lingered. Quiet, but insistent. What happens the next time someone tries to cross the line? And will I be ready again?